On a blistering Georgia afternoon in August 1970, James Brown stood on the shoulder of Highway 301 watching black smoke pour from his brand-new Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. And the only coherent thought cutting through his frustration was that he'd just spent $9,000 on a motorcycle he didn't know how to fix. The bike had been running perfectly for 2 hours, carrying him south from Augusta with the kind of freedom he hadn't felt in months. The wind stripping away the pressure of being James Brown and leaving behind just James. Just a man on a machine with no destination except away. But now the engine was dead. Smoke was rising like a distress signal, and he was stranded somewhere between nowhere and nothing, with the August heat turning his leather jacket into a portable sauna. The sound of approaching engines made James turn. 12 motorcycles, all Harleys, all ridden by black men, rolled up in tight formation. The lead rider pulled off his helmet, revealing a scarred face and gray-threaded beard. "That's a beautiful machine to be treating so poorly," the man said. "Name's Ironside. We call ourselves the Southern Soul Riders." James shook his hand. James Brown. Recognition rippled through the group immediately. Before we continue with this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you untold stories of music legends that you won't find anywhere else. Ironside held up a hand, silencing the excited younger riders, but James could see respect shifting the dynamic. "Mr. Brown, we can tow your bike to our garage, get it fixed up proper. It's about 10 miles east in a town called Groveland." He paused. "But I need to be straight with you. You're about to walk into a situation that might not be what you're looking for right now." James should have declined politely, should have called for professional help and waited in air-conditioned comfort. But something in Ironside's voice pulled at James's curiosity. "I've walked into plenty of situations in my life," James said. "One more won't kill me." The Southern Soul Riders Clubhouse was a converted mechanics garage on the edge of Groveland, a building that had seen better decades but stood solid through sheer determination. Inside, the space was split between meticulous order and barely controlled chaos. On one side, motorcycles lined up with military precision, tools organized, everything clean and maintained. On the other side, the walls were covered with black power posters, newspaper clippings about police brutality, photographs of civil rights marches. The division was so obvious, it might as well have been painted on the floor. 12 men stood in the garage, and James could immediately see they were separated into 2 groups. Older riders on one side, younger on the other, the space between them filled with tension thick enough to cut. Ironside caught James looking at the divide. "That's our problem, Mr. Brown. Our founder, man we call Brother Solomon, he got arrested 6 days ago at a sit-in protest supporting the Black Panthers. They're holding him on charges that'll keep him locked up for at least 6 months, maybe a year." He gestured at the younger riders. "Half our brotherhood thinks we should be out there protesting, raising hell, making noise until they let Solomon go. The other half," he indicated the older men, "thinks getting political is what got Solomon arrested in the first place. That we're a motorcycle club, not an activist organization, and mixing the two will destroy everything we've built." The young rider who'd spoken earlier stepped forward. "My name's Little Thunder, Mr. Brown. And with respect to my brothers, staying silent is a political choice. Brother Solomon got arrested because he stood up for what's right, and if we're not willing to stand with him, what kind of brotherhood is this?" An older rider, a man with graying hair and the bearing of a soldier, responded quietly. "My name's Sergeant Blues, son. I fought in Vietnam, watched brothers die because commanders made emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. Solomon knew the risk when he joined that protest. We honor him by keeping this club alive, not by getting the rest of us arrested or worse. The argument escalated until Ironside stopped them. Over the next hour, they told James about Brother Solomon, their founder who'd marched in Selma and built this brotherhood as a space for black men to experience freedom. Now Solomon was in jail for 6 months, and without him, the family was fracturing. That evening, Ironside explained why he'd brought James here. Solomon always talked about you, about how the one in your music was a survival philosophy. I'm watching this brotherhood die and don't know how to stop it. James understood that feeling, had experienced it every time a band member quit, every time creative differences became personal battles, every time something built with love started crumbling under pressure. "What do you think Solomon would want?" he asked. Ironside laughed bitterly. "That's the problem, Mr. Brown. Both sides think they know. Little Thunder and the young ones think Solomon would want them fighting, making noise, demanding justice. Sergeant Blues and the older members think Solomon would want them protecting the club, keeping the brotherhood alive to fight another day. And maybe they're both right, which means they're both wrong." James had planned to leave the next morning, motorcycle fixed and adventure over. But something kept him in Groveland. Maybe it was the way Little Thunder had looked at him with hope. Like James Brown's presence could somehow fix what was broken. Maybe it was recognition, seeing in this divided brotherhood echoes of every band he'd led through crisis. Or maybe it was simpler, the memory of his own time in juvenile detention, knowing that Solomon was sitting in a cell right now for the crime of demanding dignity. So when morning came, instead of riding away, James rode with the Southern Soul Riders to their usual Sunday breakfast spot, a black-owned diner called Mama's Kitchen. At their Sunday breakfast, the division was obvious. Older riders led by Sergeant Blues rode with military precision. Younger riders, following Little Thunder, rode aggressive and loose. At the table, James explained the one. "In funk, we put everything on that first beat. It's the foundation. Without it, nothing works. The one is what holds everything together." He looked around the table. But the one isn't just a beat. It's a philosophy. It means knowing what's essential, what's foundational, what you can't compromise on. Everything else is negotiable. But the one is sacred. That's what you need to find for this brotherhood. Sergeant Blues leaned forward. "So, what's the one for this brotherhood? What's the thing we can't compromise on?" The question hung in the air, and James could see both groups thinking, considering. "That's what you need to figure out," James said. "Is the one loyalty to Solomon? Is it the motorcycle club itself? Is it the fight for justice? Is it just being there for each other? Because right now, you're acting like everything is the one, and when everything's essential, nothing is." Little Thunder shook his head. "With respect, Mr. Brown, some things you can't compromise on. Justice isn't negotiable. If Solomon's in jail for doing what's right, we have to fight for him. And if fighting for him destroys the club," Sergeant Blues countered, "then what did we accomplish? Solomon built this place to give us something solid, something that would last. Throwing that away for a protest that won't change anything is spitting on his legacy." The argument was starting again, voices rising, and James held up both hands. "Stop. Both of you are talking about Solomon like he's dead, like you're arguing over his corpse. But Solomon's alive. He's just in jail. Has anyone actually asked him what he wants?" The silence that followed was profound. Ironside finally spoke. "They're not letting visitors yet. He's in county lockup, and the sheriff's making it difficult, saying it's for Solomon's protection, that feelings are running high." James nodded slowly, an idea forming. Then we need to change that. And I know exactly how to do it. James spent time with Little Thunder, a young writer who dreamed of being a musician but believed success was impossible. James took him to his Augusta studio, let him play for session musicians. The kid had it, that indefinable quality that separated people who played music from people who were music. "You're good enough," James said. "Talent gets you in the door, but work keeps you in the room." He arranged for Little Thunder to intern at the studio, giving him a future beyond the arguments. "This doesn't solve your problems at the club," James said, "but it gives you a future beyond Groveland. Solomon fought for your right to have dreams. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you dreaming is selfish." Sergeant Blues, 5 years sober, confessed to James that Solomon's absence made old cravings return. "I've been there," James said quietly. They were sitting in the garage late at night, just the two of them. The kind of 3 a.m. conversation where truth becomes inevitable. "People think because I'm successful, because I'm the godfather of soul, that I've got everything figured out. But I've stared at pills and bottles trying to find oblivion because consciousness hurt too much. Using won't fix what's broken. It'll just postpone the pain until it becomes unbearable." He leaned forward. "Solomon isn't gone. The club isn't dying. Things are changing, and change feels like death. But it's not. You survived Vietnam and addiction. You can survive this too." 3 writers had lost their jobs when the textile mill closed. James needed a road crew for his upcoming tour. "I've got a tour starting next month, 40 cities in 60 days. I need people to handle equipment, set up stages, manage logistics. It's hard work, long hours, but it pays well and it's honest," he told them. Within hours, they were training with his current crew, earning honest wages doing work that mattered. "You'll earn every dollar," James promised, "but you'll earn it being part of something bigger than yourselves." The breakthrough came on the 6th day when James's connections finally secured visitation rights for Solomon. James, Ironside, Little Thunder, and Sergeant Blues made the drive to the county jail, a grim building that looked designed to crush hope. Solomon was brought to the visitation room in handcuffs, a small man with dignified bearing and eyes that burned with uncompromising conviction. When he saw his brothers, tears ran down his face. "I thought you'd forgotten me," Solomon said quietly. Ironside shook his head. "Never, brother. We could never forget you." Solomon looked at each of them, then at James. "You're James Brown. I'd recognize you anywhere." James nodded. "Your brothers needed help. I'm just trying to do what I can." What Solomon said next changed everything. "I don't want you fighting for me," he said firmly. "Not the way you're thinking. I made a choice to stand up for what's right, and I'll face the consequences without regret. What I need, what I'm begging you for, is to hold the brotherhood together. Don't let my absence destroy what we built." He looked specifically at Little Thunder and Sergeant Blues. "You're both right and you're both wrong. Fighting for justice matters, but so does protecting what we have. The real question isn't which principle wins. It's how you honor both without destroying yourselves. This is the moment, 60% through the story, where everything shifts." Solomon's words aren't what anyone expected. He's not asking to be rescued. He's asking them to be better than their divisions. "You want to know what the one is for this brotherhood?" Solomon continued, his voice strong despite the circumstances. "It's not me. It's not the motorcycles. It's not even the fight for justice or the need for safety. The one is each other. The commitment that says we show up for our brothers regardless of disagreement. that we protect each other even when we can't agree, that family means staying together when it would be easier to split apart. He looked at James. Tell them about the one, James. Tell them how it works in music when everyone wants to play their own thing, but the song only works if they come together. James spoke carefully. In a funk band, every musician wants to shine, wants their moment. The drummer wants complex fills, the bassist wants to run scales, the horn section wants to improvise. But if everyone does their own thing, you don't get music, you get noise. The one forces everyone to come back together, to remember they're part of something bigger. You can have your moment, but it has to serve the whole, not just showcase your skill. He looked around the visitation room. Your brotherhood is the same. You can disagree about tactics, about whether to be political or protective. But those disagreements have to serve the relationship, not destroy it. Sister Grace suggested a fundraiser concert. Raise money for Solomon's defense through music, she said. Mr. Brown, you're here. These boys worship your music. What if you did a concert, a fundraiser, right here in Groveland? The money goes to Solomon's defense. But more important, it shows this community that Black people can come together, can support each other without violence or division. James understood immediately why this was brilliant. It's the one, he said. The foundation that everyone can agree on. Doesn't matter if you think the club should be political or protective. Everyone wants Solomon to have a fair defense. Within 24 hours, the Southern Soul Riders organized a concert at Groveland High School's football field. Word spread through the Black community like wildfire. James Brown, the godfather of soul, performing in tiny Groveland, Georgia, with all proceeds going to help Brother Solomon. By Saturday evening, over 2,000 people had gathered, the largest event Groveland had ever seen. Before the show, James told the riders, "Tonight isn't about me. It's about proving you can be divided on tactics, but united on purpose. Little Thunder, you think the club should be more activist? Fine. Sergeant Blues, you think protecting what you have matters most? Also fine. But both of you agree Solomon deserves justice, and that's the one. That's the beat everything else builds from. After tonight, I'm leaving. Your divisions, your decisions about the club's future, that's for you to figure out. But you'll figure it out together as brothers, because Solomon trusted you with his legacy, and that trust demands you be worthy of it." When James performed Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, 2,000 voices responded together. The Southern Soul Riders stood at the side of the stage. Little Thunder and Sergeant Blues stood next to each other, and somewhere during the performance, their disagreements stopped mattering, replaced by shared recognition of what they were witnessing. This was excellence. This was what Solomon had built the brotherhood to celebrate. When James shouted, "Say it loud," and 2,000 voices responded, "I'm Black and I'm Proud," both young and old riders were crying, finally understanding what the one meant, that their differences were minor notes built on the major chord of brotherhood. The concert raised $15,000 for Solomon's defense. After, the riders presented James with a leather vest bearing their patch. "You're an honorary member for life," Ironside said. James accepted the vest, feeling the weight of it, understanding it represented the week he'd spent learning that the principles he'd developed in music applied to everything, to brotherhood and community and the constant negotiation between principle and pragmatism. James left Groveland understanding the one wasn't just musical. It was a survival strategy for Black people navigating a world designed to fragment and destroy them. Whether it was a motorcycle club divided over tactics, a community struggling with injustice, or a nation trying to define what equality actually meant. The one was the same, finding the foundation everyone could agree on and building from there. 3 months later, Solomon was released from jail. The charges reduced through a combination of the legal defense fund and media pressure that James had quietly helped orchestrate. The Southern Soul Riders were still debating tactics, still disagreeing about the balance between activism and preservation. But they were doing it as a unified brotherhood, understanding that their disagreements made them stronger rather than weaker. Little Thunder was working at James's studio while still riding with the club, learning to balance dreams with responsibility. Sergeant Blues had stayed sober, finding strength in the memory of that 3 a.m. conversation with James Brown. The 3 riders who'd lost their jobs were thriving on tour, sending money home to their families, and discovering that the world was bigger than they'd imagined. Years later, James rarely mentioned Madison Square Garden or the Apollo Theater. Instead, he talked about a week in Groveland, when a broken motorcycle led him to a divided brotherhood and taught him the one wasn't just in music, it was in living, in choosing to come back together after disagreement, in finding the beat that held everything together even when harmony seemed impossible. The Southern Soul Riders still exist, now in their 3rd generation of members, still teaching young black men that motorcycles represent freedom, that brotherhood requires work, that the one matters more than anything else. And on the wall of their clubhouse hangs a photograph from that August night in 1970. James Brown on stage with his arms raised, the crowd ecstatic, and 12 riders standing together watching the man who taught them that being divided doesn't mean being broken, as long as you never forget the foundation you're built on. In the end, James Brown's week with the Southern Soul Riders proved something he'd always suspected, but never quite articulated. Excellence wasn't domain-specific. The same principles that made funk revolutionary could make a brotherhood stronger, could help people navigate the impossible space between survival and resistance, between protecting what you had and fighting for what you deserved. The one was everything. Without it, you had noise. With it, you had music. You had community. You had the foundation to build something that could survive anything, even the absence of the people who started it. Brother Solomon, released from jail and returned to leadership, never forgot what James Brown had done. Not saving him, because Solomon didn't need saving, but showing his brothers that their disagreements were features, not bugs. That a brotherhood strong enough to hold contradiction was a brotherhood strong enough to change the world. And every time the Southern Soul Riders rode, every time they started their engines and felt that rumble that went deeper than sound, into vibration, into the fundamental frequency of existence, they remembered the one. Remembered James Brown's week among them. Remembered that being black and proud meant being excellent and united, even when unity looked like holding space for difference.